Millionaire abandoned his pregnant wife for his mistress, then lost them both in one day. A single choice can shatter a lifetime of dreams. This is the story of Leonard Aldridge, the billionaire CEO, who had everything, yet lost it all in the time it takes to draw a single breath. His gilded life concealed a brewing storm, a pregnant wife quietly suffering as he was swept away by passion for a young mistress. Ambition, betrayal, and greed intertwined, leading to a catastrophic day when fate dealt him the harshest blow imaginable. In an avalanche of lies and heartbreak, Leonard lost the two women he cared about most. One was his strength, the other his temptation. Here is how it all came crashing down. Leonard Aldridge was once admired as much for his sharp mind as for his impeccable taste in suits. Standing at 6 feet tall with dark, neatly combed hair, he radiated the confident aura of a self-made man. He was the majority shareholder of Aldridge Global, a multinational conglomerate known for everything from luxury hotels to tech startups. To outsiders, Leonard's life appeared flawless. He lived in a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of Chicago, complete with an indoor swimming pool, a private screening room, and a garden that boasted centuries-old oaks. Photographs in business journals often captured him wearing that practiced smile, projecting an image of unwavering success. Yet behind that veneer, Leonard was anything but satisfied. He had climbed the ladder of success, fueled by ambition and cunning, but no matter how many deals he closed or awards he received, a hollow ache gnawed at his insides. His dissatisfaction, ironically, never spilled into his marriage, at least at first. He had married young, tying the knot with Marianne Brookshire, an insightful and compassionate woman who had grown up modestly in rural Ohio. They met during Leonard's early hustle years at a venture capital conference in Boston. Marianne had been working part-time as a barista while finishing her business degree, hoping to break into the corporate world. Despite their different backgrounds, sparks flew. Marianne immediately recognized something in Leonard's relentless determination. She saw a dreamer, a force to be reckoned with. Leonard, for his part, found Marianne's grounded nature a soothing antidote to his restless mind. When Leonard launched Aldridge Global, Marianne, though lacking industry experience, stood unwavering by his side. Over the years, she served as his moral compass. She was the one who told him to show mercy when negotiations became too cutthroat. She was the one who encouraged him to invest in scholarships and philanthropic endeavors. And for a time, Leonard heeded her advice. They seemed to be a power couple, an embodiment of success and compassion, giving hope to aspiring entrepreneurs across America. But as Aldridge Global soared, Leonard's thirst for more intensified. He found himself caught up in glitzy circles, making connections with celebrities and seeking out the most elite partnerships. Secretly, he relished the limelight. He attended lavish parties, exchanged jokes with film stars, and occasionally took private jets to distant locales. Marianne would accompany him when she could. Though pregnant with their first child, she tired easily. Gradually, her presence faded into the background as Leonard discovered a new set of admirers. He ignored the subtle guilt growing inside him, the sense that he was drifting away from the woman who had believed in him from day one. By the time Marianne was in her second trimester, Leonard was living on a different planet. He was enthralled by the glittering illusions of socialites and sycophants. Whenever he thought of Marianne, he reassured himself she was safe and comfortable at home. He didn't know that while she was taking care of her own health, she was also fighting her own battles. She felt lonely in the huge house, overshadowed by staff and public relations calls from his office. The woman he had promised to protect was slowly feeling the weight of his absence, but she hadn't yet voiced her fears. She believed in her husband's love. This fragile balance was about to implode. As Leonard's appetite for extravagance expanded, He set his sights on a young, beautiful social media influencer named Roxanne Vales. With her silky black hair, shimmering green eyes, and magnetic social presence, Roxanne was used to capturing hearts for sport. Before long, Leonard was smitten, ignoring the warnings of longtime friends and forgetting the vow he had made to Marianne. He believed he could have it all: his loyal wife, his unborn child, and a passionate affair. In his mind, his empire was strong enough to protect him from the consequences of his indiscretions. The days sped by, each one bringing Marianne closer to her due date, and each one pulling Leonard further from his moral center. The quiet storms that raged beneath the surface would soon break open for the world to see. Karma was winding its clock, preparing a moment that would shake Leonard Aldridge to his core. Roxanne Vales was no stranger to attention. Her father, Francis Vales, had once been a well-known television producer. She was raised in a wealthy environment, attending exclusive schools and rubbing shoulders with high-profile figures. Even as a teenager, Roxanne seemed trained to seduce and manipulate those around her. By the time she hit her early 20s, she had developed a powerful Instagram presence, boasting 500,000 followers, enchanted by her glamorous travel photos and brand endorsements. At 24, she was nearly 2 decades younger than Leonard, yet her youth and cunning intelligence drew him in like a moth to a flame. They first met at an event for a prestigious non-profit organization. Leonard was there to deliver a speech about fostering entrepreneurship in disadvantaged communities. Roxanne was an invited guest influencer, given a front-row seat to post about the philanthropic event on social media. Dazzled by her captivating aura, Leonard found himself chatting with her over champagne long after the event had ended. Later that evening, he rationalized his conversation with Roxanne as networking. He told himself there was no harm in swapping business cards, no sin in complimenting a beautiful woman's style. But from that first exchange of phone numbers, an undercurrent of desire ensnared him. Days later, text messages escalated into late-night phone calls. Within a week, discreet rendezvous replaced the innocent banter. Leonard found an electric connection with Roxanne he hadn't felt in years. He was intoxicated by her rebellious nature, her confident opinions on everything from cryptocurrencies to the latest gossip in Hollywood. At first, he tried to resist her magnetism by reminding himself of Marianne, pregnant and waiting back at home. But soon he relegated those anxious thoughts to a dark corner of his mind, telling himself Marianne would never find out and that the fling was just a harmless way to blow off steam. This delusion fueled secret flights to rendezvous at a penthouse suite in Manhattan or a beach villa in Malibu. It was all so exciting for Leonard, who'd grown bored of the day-to-day predictability of corporate life. Yet, for all the excitement, there were cracks in the facade. Roxanne might have been alluring, but she also craved far more than fleeting pleasure. She wanted the lifestyle of a magnate's wife: fancy galas, diamond necklaces, and the prestige of being on a billionaire's arm. As their affair blossomed, Roxanne's demands escalated. She would pout if Leonard answered calls from Marianne in her presence, or if he seemed too stressed from corporate deals to shower her with attention. There was something unsettling about her. She was adept at playing the victim, skillful at prying out Leonard's emotional vulnerabilities and turning them to her advantage. Whenever he felt a flicker of guilt, Roxanne skillfully fanned it away, whispering sweet justifications that fed his worst impulses. In the meantime, Marianne was painstakingly preparing for their baby's arrival. She spent her days reading parenting books, carefully organizing the nursery, and feeling the slow creep of doubt. Sometimes she would call Leonard, only to hear a muffled background or an excuse about an important meeting running late. She never confronted him outright. Trust ran deep in her veins. Yet that trust was beginning to erode as small red flags accumulated. Leonard's obsession with Roxanne culminated in a decision that would irreparably change his life. Late one night, After a heated argument with Roxanne about his hesitation to leave Marianne, he phoned an old friend named Owen Richardson, a top divorce attorney in Chicago. Owen was startled by Leonard's frantic request to draft separation papers. The conversation was hushed, laced with guilt and lust. Owen reminded him about Marianne's pregnancy, urging him to think carefully. But Leonard, drunk on a dangerous mix of arrogance and infatuation, refused to listen. He began to plot an exit strategy. He envisioned a future with Roxanne, complete with glamorous yacht parties and Instagram-worthy vacations. The unborn child scarcely crossed his mind. In his twisted logic, the child's future was secured by Leonard's wealth. He would never abandon the baby financially, and that somehow appeased his conscience. The seeds of his betrayal were planted. Now all he needed was the right moment to tear Marianne's world apart. Marianne sensed the shift before she had proof. The distance, the hurried phone calls that ended when she entered the room, the cancelled prenatal appointments, these spoke volumes. Although she put on a brave face, a constant heaviness settled on her chest. Some nights she would wake up to an empty bed, only to discover Leonard sprawled out in his office, wide awake, staring at an unending stream of text messages. When confronted, he always had an excuse. A crisis at one of his overseas branches, urgent negotiations with European investors. And because Marianne trusted him, she swallowed her suspicions, letting them fester inside. One afternoon, during her third trimester, Marianne ventured into Leonard's study to find a legal document lying on his desk. Her curiosity piqued, and a sense of dread swept over her. The document bore words like separation and irreconcilable differences. She froze, her heart hammering as if it might leap out of her chest. She quickly slid the document back into place, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. So it was true. Something had corroded Leonard's commitment to her. For the next few days, she went about her routine in a fog. Her prenatal yoga session, baby registry shopping, even a phone conversation with her sister, none of it felt real. Every moment was overshadowed by the knowledge that her once devoted husband was plotting to cast her aside. During a prenatal checkup, Marianne's gynecologist, Dr. Regina Spencer, expressed concern about Marianne's elevated blood pressure. Stress was likely taking its toll. She encouraged Marianne to rest, avoid confrontation, and focus on her health advice that only drove Marianne deeper into despair. How could she calmly anticipate motherhood when her partner was on the verge of walking away? Yet, determined not to let her unborn child suffer, Marianne forced herself to eat well, practice her breathing exercises, and pretend everything was fine. She even convinced herself Leonard might reconsider once he saw their baby's face. Meanwhile, Leonard, oblivious to Marianne's discovery, intensified his relationship with Roxanne. She accompanied him to exclusive dinners and corporate functions under the guise of being an industry influencer. Rumors began to swirl among Aldridge Global's executives, but no one dared confront the boss. The hush was only broken by the occasional gossip passed between secretaries or whispers at after-work bars. Some employees claimed to have seen Leonard kissing Roxanne in darkened corners of board meetings or sneaking out of charity events together. Others speculated that Roxanne was manipulating him to get a slice of his fortune, but they had no proof, and Leonard's power was absolute. Marianne wasn't entirely alone in her suspicion. One of Leonard's longtime employees, the head of human resources, Wendy Martinez, had always admired Marianne's warmth. Wendy observed changes in Leonard's behavior, the cancelled events Marianne used to attend, the hush that fell whenever Marianne called the office. Concerned, Wendy arranged to meet Marianne for lunch under the pretense of wanting her input on a philanthropic project. Over salads and iced tea, Wendy delicately asked if Marianne was doing okay. Fighting back tears, Marianne confessed she sensed something was amiss in her marriage. Although Wendy didn't have the heart to tell her everything, she offered gentle reassurance and an unspoken promise to help however she could. A mixture of dread and resigned acceptance filled Marianne's days. She prayed that if Leonard was truly in the grips of an affair, he would come to his senses. But as weeks passed, the signs pointed to an escalating betrayal. The tension hung in the air like storm clouds, ready to unleash their fury. In the quiet of the mansion's grand living room, Marianne softly sang lullabies to her growing belly. She clung to a faint hope that the life stirring within her would awaken fatherly instincts in Leonard. Yet with every passing day, Leonard retreated deeper into Roxanne's embrace. Fate was preparing a crucible that would test both Marianne's resolve and Leonard's soul. The day Leonard finally presented the separation papers was a day Marianne would never forget. It was late evening. She was reading a book on the psychology of newborns in their bedroom, a space once filled with warmth and laughter, now chillingly cold. Without warning, Leonard strode in, his tie loosened and an anxious look on his face. Marianne could see the tension etched into his expression, and her heart pounded as if it already knew what was coming. He began with a rehearsed speech about growing apart and needing space. The words sounded hollow, an echo of well-worn clichés. When he handed over the neatly folded papers, Marianne stared at them in disbelief. She didn't speak for what felt like an eternity. Her eyes darted between the documents and Leonard's face, searching for some shred of empathy, some trace of the man she loved. "Why now?" she finally asked, her voice a trembling whisper. "Our baby is due in just a few weeks, Leo," Leonard stammered. He tried to adopt a compassionate tone, but his words rang false. He offered vague assurances about financial support and paternal involvement. Every syllable made Marianne's stomach twist in knots. She was too overwhelmed to be angry. She felt a numbness creeping over her. In that moment, she glimpsed the utter emptiness that had taken root inside Leonard. The man who had once fought tooth and nail alongside her to build a dream life now seemed more like a soulless stranger. But Marianne's love refused to vanish easily. She pleaded with him to reconsider, reminding him of the promise they made when they exchanged vows, of the baby they had both wanted. For a fleeting instant, doubt flashed across Leonard's face. Yet he quickly composed himself, reasserting his decision. He accused Marianne of clinging to an idealized version of their marriage. The hurt in Marianne's eyes cut deep, but Leonard steeled his heart. He had a new life on the horizon, one he believed would bring excitement and freedom. As far as he was concerned, Marianne was just collateral damage. When Leonard left the room, Marianne collapsed onto the bed, sobbing uncontrollably. She lay there for hours, the legal documents crumpled in her hand. She felt the baby move inside her, a gentle push against her ribs, as if to remind her she was not alone. In that moment, she made a silent vow. No matter what happened, she would fight for her child's well-being. She would be both mother and father if she had to. But the heartbreak was real, raw, and immeasurable. She was forced to confront a world where her husband abandoned her at her most vulnerable. With the separation papers signed, Leonard wasted no time unveiling Roxanne to his inner circle. He arranged a lavish birthday party at a famous Chicago rooftop lounge, inviting his closest business associates and a few select friends. Marianne was conspicuously absent, staying home to rest, though Leonard didn't give it much thought. At the party, he introduced Roxanne as his special companion. Champagne flowed freely, live music pulsed through the crowd, and the city skyline glimmered in the background. There was an unmistakable brashness in Leonard's demeanor. He felt liberated, convinced he had shed the weight of a stale marriage. Among the party's attendees was Lucas Middleton, Leonard's college friend and a prominent venture capitalist. Lucas had known Marianne almost as long as he had known Leonard. Sensing something terribly wrong, he cornered Leonard in a quiet alcove. "What the hell is going on, man? Marianne is about to have your baby. Why are you flaunting some new partner here?" Lucas demanded, disgust barely veiled. Leonard responded with a mix of irritation and condescension. "We've grown apart. Don't judge me if you haven't walked in my shoes. I'm taking care of Marianne financially, and that's more than enough." Lucas glared at him, swallowing back the urge to punch his old friend in the jaw. He had suspected an affair, but never dreamed Leonard would be so callous. Departing the party, Lucas resolved to reach out to Marianne, if only to make sure she wasn't alone in her darkest hour. Meanwhile, Roxanne basked in the glow of her new status as Leonard's official partner. She took selfies with prominent guests, posting them on her Instagram stories, each caption more ostentatious than the last. It was all trending, liked and shared by thousands of her followers. Emboldened by the adoration, Roxanne slipped easily into the role of Queen of the Night. Yet beneath her exterior, she was on edge, too. She had orchestrated Leonard's departure from Marianne with calculated subtlety, always playing the supportive lover, never directly demanding he leave his wife, but dropping enough hints to stoke his dissatisfaction. Now that she had him, an undercurrent of anxiety rippled through her mind. Did Leonard truly love her, or was she just a thrilling conquest? Would his attention wane once another shiny object caught his eye? But in that moment, tipsy on power and champagne, Roxanne dismissed these doubts. She had effectively taken center stage in the life of a billionaire. The trifling concerns of a pregnant wife were far from her realm an afterthought, a minor inconvenience. The night ended in luxurious intimacy at a 5-star suite, with Leonard murmuring sweet nothings about a future without limitations. Roxanne fell asleep in his arms, certain she had secured a place in an opulent new chapter of her life. At the mansion, Marianne slumped against her bed's headboard, rummaging through old photo albums. The memories stabbed at her heart. The baby delivered a firm kick, as if sensing the tension. Tears blurred her vision as she closed the album. She had to move forward, to muster the courage to protect her child. She began to form a plan, consulting a lawyer recommended by Wendy Martinez, the HR director. Although Marianne had never been driven by financial greed, she understood that ensuring her baby's future meant defending her own rights. By the time Leonard's party ended, Marianne had already begun scheduling legal consultations, determined to stand up to him if necessary. But cosmic forces had something else in store, a twist no one foresaw. The marriage, the affair, and even the unborn child's future were all on a collision course. Events were converging that would culminate in a single day of massive upheaval, secrets revealed, hearts broken, and destinies changed forever. Though Leonard and Roxanne reveled in public displays of affection, cracks soon formed in their relationship. It started with small squabbles, disagreements over restaurant choices, or which influencer collaborations Roxanne should accept. Leonard grew weary of Roxanne's constant hunger for social media validation, while Roxanne scolded him for being overly controlling. Behind closed doors, their once electric chemistry turned volatile, giving way to suspicion and jealousy. Roxanne had always craved transparency in the men she dated. Yet Leonard was a complicated figure, always protective of his business dealings and personal brand. He refused to share details about sensitive board negotiations or the complexities of his investments. Roxanne felt shut out, as if he was keeping a part of himself locked away. This secrecy evoked memories of her father, a man who had shielded his darker side from the family. Roxanne couldn't quell the nagging fear that Leonard might not be as transparent in love as he was in lavish gifts. One evening, she pried into Leonard's phone, hoping to find reassurance. Instead, she found multiple messages to Marianne that conflicted with his claim that he had severed ties. While Leonard didn't exactly promise a reconciliation, he was sending Marianne updates about financial arrangements and the baby. Worse, in a few of these messages, he expressed concern for Marianne's well-being, telling her to contact him if she needed anything. To Roxanne, this felt like betrayal. How could he still show concern for a woman he supposedly no longer cared about? An ugly argument erupted. Tears flowed, accusations were hurled, and fragile trust shattered. Leonard tried to explain that he was simply fulfilling his responsibilities, ensuring Marianne's stability until the baby arrived, but Roxanne's insecurities soared. She suspected that the child, Leonard's legacy, could always serve as a tether, pulling him back to Marianne. Meanwhile, Marianne quietly worked with her new lawyer, James Eckhart, a seasoned professional who had taken on high-profile family law cases. James examined Leonard's wealth and assets, guiding Marianne on what to expect in a settlement. He was astonished by how sympathetic Marianne was, focusing on the baby's future rather than seeking personal vengeance. Marianne simply wanted to raise her child with dignity, unburdened by the chaotic aftermath of Leonard's choices. Nevertheless, James insisted she deserved a fair share of the empire she had helped build, at least in moral support, if not in direct business contributions. Late at night, Marianne found comfort in therapy sessions via Zoom with Dr. Cynthia Lang, a noted psychologist who specialized in marital trauma. Though Marianne had been reluctant at first, Wendy Martinez had convinced her it might help. Through these sessions, Marianne found the courage to process her pain and anger. She came to recognize that Leonard's betrayal was not her fault. Dr. Lang encouraged her to draw boundaries, to refuse to let Leonard manipulate her in his quest to have it all. Feeling empowered for the first time in months, Marianne decided to meet Leonard face to face. She invited him to the mansion one evening, insisting they discuss the baby's future. Leonard arrived, wearing an impeccably tailored suit and reeking of tension. She guided him to the living room, seating them opposite each other. The distance between them felt immeasurable. For a moment, Leonard glanced around the room, remembering simpler times, and Marianne saw a flicker of regret cross his face. But it vanished quickly, replaced by his mask of corporate indifference. Her voice resolute, Marianne spelled out her conditions. She wanted full custody until the child turned 3, with a generous visitation schedule to ensure the baby knew its father. Financially, she demanded enough support to comfortably raise their child, including funds for top-tier education. Leonard listened, his posture stiff. He offered no apology, no remorse. He simply asked for time to review her demands and have Owen Richardson, his divorce attorney, draw up revised documents. As he left that night, Marianne couldn't help but feel a bitter satisfaction. She was no longer the helpless victim, hoping for him to return. She was staking a claim to protect her unborn child's life. Leonard, on the other hand, drove back to his penthouse suite, unsettled. He resented Marianne's newfound backbone. He had expected her to remain meek and dependent. That resentment fueled his growing disquiet, leaving him wide awake, staring at the city lights. Little did he know, greater upheavals awaited him. His illusions of control were about to be dismantled in a single day. His day of reckoning was closer than he could imagine. Morning dawned over Chicago with a golden hue, as if oblivious to the storms brewing in the personal lives of its citizens. Leonard woke up in the penthouse, gazing at the city skyline from floor-to-ceiling windows. Instead of feeling awe, a lump of anxiety formed in his throat. He had a critical business meeting in an hour, one that could finalize a multi-million-dollar merger. Outside, traffic hummed and the promise of wealth beckoned. But inside, an insidious tension gripped his heart, whispering that no amount of money would protect him from the consequences of his choices. At the same time, Marianne stirred in her bed at the mansion. Another sleepless night had taken its toll. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She carefully rose to her feet, adjusting the maternity robe around her growing belly. Today felt different. A subtle apprehension hung in the air. She wondered if it was just her hormones running wild, or if she was on the cusp of discovering a new, painful reality. The baby fluttered in her womb, as though reminding her that she was not alone. Later that morning, Marianne had a scheduled ultrasound appointment. She and Leonard had agreed he would attend via video call. He claimed he was too busy to be there in person. Marianne had reconciled herself to this disappointment, focusing on the excitement of seeing her baby on the screen. Seated in the doctor's office, she stared at the monitor as Dr. Spencer guided the ultrasound wand. The baby's heartbeat pulsed steadily, a sign of life and hope. Yet Marianne's eyes welled with tears, knowing that her child's father was choosing to remain a distant presence. During the scan, Dr. Spencer's brow furrowed. She pointed at the screen, explaining something that Marianne had trouble following. The baby was healthy, but Dr. Spencer suggested further tests for Marianne's blood pressure and potential complications. Anxiety gnawed at Marianne. She forced a shaky smile, reassuring herself everything would be fine. But Dr. Spencer cautioned that excessive stress could precipitate early labor. With Leonard absent, Marianne had no one to comfort her. As she left, the weight of isolation fell heavily upon her heart. Meanwhile, at the downtown skyscraper housing Aldridge Global's boardroom, Leonard launched into the crucial merger negotiations with a firm handshake and a firm conviction. Executives from the other company, New Wave Tech, filled the long glass table, ready to finalize the deal. This merger promised to bolster Aldridge Global's stake in cutting-edge technology, forging a path to future billions. But as the discussions progressed, Leonard noticed his phone buzzing incessantly in his pocket messages. Calls, urgent notifications. Sweat beaded at his brow. Roxanne's name flashed on the screen multiple times. Irritated, he ignored it. He had asked her not to disturb him during this pivotal meeting. Then came messages from Owen Richardson, his divorce attorney, labeled urgent. Leonard tried to focus on the contract bullet points the New Wave Tech CEO was outlining, but he felt the tension in the room shift as well. Finally, his CFO slid over a note. Owen Richardson has been calling the office non-stop. He says it's an emergency. Forced to pause the proceedings, Leonard stepped out into the hallway. Owen's urgent voice crackled through the line. A local journalist, a certain Paula Klein from Chicago's leading business journal, had stumbled upon scandalous details of Leonard's affair with Roxanne. A whistleblower from within Aldridge Global had leaked emails and pictures. Paula was threatening to run a major expose, painting Leonard as a corrupt billionaire exploiting philanthropic fronts for personal gain while engaging in an illicit affair that was about to become very public. What about the settlement negotiations? My marriage? My baby? Leonard hissed, struggling to keep his voice low. Owen admitted that if Paula Klein's story went live, public outrage could harm not only Leonard's reputation, but also Marianne's privacy. The board would panic. Investors might pull out. They needed to strategize, to quash the story, or at least limit its damage. As if that wasn't enough, Roxanne started flooding him with voicemails. In tears, she claimed to have received hateful, threatening messages on her social media. The leaked affair had put her in the crosshairs of enraged fans and moral critics. Paparazzi were lurking outside her condo. She was afraid to leave. Leonard felt cornered, pressed from all sides by scandal. He re-entered the boardroom, visibly shaken. Within minutes, the New Wave Tech representatives sensed something was amiss. They demanded reassurance that Aldridge Global's public image wasn't about to implode. Leonard tried to bluff, to maintain composure, but his shaking hands and clipped responses betrayed him. The negotiations came to a screeching halt, the once certain merger now precariously hanging by a thread. The New Wave Tech CEO closed his briefcase, saying they would revisit the contract once the media storm had settled. With that, They left, leaving Leonard reeling. Swiftly, Leonard convened an emergency meeting with his top executives and PR advisors. They frantically discussed damage control strategies. Some advised paying hush money to Paula Klein, others suggested a strategic statement acknowledging marital challenges without revealing details. But the rumor mill was already churning. Social media was abuzz with speculation. Share prices dipped. Shareholders flooded Leonard's email demanding answers. Feeling the walls closing in, Leonard made a snap decision to head to Roxanne's condo to calm her down, hoping that a united front might salvage the situation. He left the office in a whirlwind, leaving behind chaos, frantic phone calls, and a shaking empire. In a single morning, he had gone from corporate titan to scandal-ridden pariah. But fate's hand hadn't finished dealing its cards. By evening, Leonard's life would unravel in ways he never imagined. Leonard found Roxanne in tears at her upscale River North condo. She was pacing the living room, occasionally glaring at her phone, jumping at every notification. The blinds were shut tight, blocking paparazzi lenses. A handful of reporters still lurked on the street outside, hungry for any glimpse or statement. She rushed to Leonard's arms. "This is insane," she sobbed. "They're calling me a homewrecker, a gold digger. I can't even open my DMs anymore." Leonard attempted to soothe her, promising to hire extra security and a top-notch crisis management firm to counter the bad press. But Roxanne was inconsolable. She threw her phone onto the couch, fresh tears shining in her eyes. "I can't live like this. I didn't sign up to be ridiculed by the whole world." In that fraught moment, Leonard began to see the ripples of chaos emanating from his choices. This scandal was not just about moral failings anymore. It posed a real threat to both of them, physically and emotionally. Roxanne was a bundle of nerves and anger, and Leonard struggled to muster any genuine comfort. The tension peaked when Roxanne demanded reassurance he would never go back to Marianne. Leonard bristled, remembering the text he'd sent Marianne only hours ago about organizing a safe birth plan. "I'm not leaving you for her," he insisted, voice tight. "But that child is still my responsibility, Roxanne. Don't ask me to abandon my own baby." Her expression darkened. She accused him of having lingering feelings for Marianne. She shouted, "Are you going to keep running to her side every time she calls, just because she's pregnant?" Leonard's temper snapped. "Don't you get it? I'm on the brink of losing everything: my company, my reputation, my family. I'm doing my best, but I can't exactly erase Marianne from my life. She's carrying my child." Their voices clashed and rose, echoing through the condo. It was a bitter irony that the same passionate spark that once drew them together now ignited rage and resentment. Finally, Leonard retreated. He promised he'd return once he had the crisis under control. Roxanne, arms crossed, watched him go without another word. As Leonard rode the elevator down, he scrolled through emails from attorneys, PR reps, and even old acquaintances offering condolences or demands. His phone's battery dwindled, mirroring his sense of dwindling control. He realized, with a pang of dread, that he had no idea if Marianne was aware of this media eruption yet. He also realized he'd never felt so alone, alienated by the mistress he had chosen over his wife, and haunted by the unborn child whose arrival was just around the corner. By early evening, the scandal was dominating news channels and social media. Leonard's PR team managed to release a vague statement, acknowledging personal and familial matters and requesting privacy. It did little to quell the storm. At the mansion, Marianne's phone buzzed with alerts. She saw the tabloids' headlines splashed across every platform. Though part of her felt vindicated, Leonard's shame was laid bare. She also felt terrified. Strangers online were dissecting her life, her marriage, her pregnancy. The stress was overwhelming. Suddenly she felt a sharp, distinct pain in her lower belly. It didn't feel like the usual contractions Braxton Hicks gave her. This was different, more urgent. Her vision blurred for a moment. As another jolt of pain coursed through her, she realized her water had broken prematurely. Panic surged. She dialed Dr. Spencer's clinic, gasping that she was in labor far too early. The receptionist instructed her to get to the hospital immediately. Fighting back tears, Marianne called Wendy Martinez, the only person she trusted to help. Wendy rushed over in minutes, guiding Marianne into a car and speeding through evening traffic to Chicago Memorial Hospital. Each contraction was more painful than the last, and Marianne could barely breathe between them. The baby was coming, ready or not. A nurse quickly took Marianne to the maternity ward. Dr. Spencer arrived, her face a mixture of urgency and reassurance. Monitors were attached, intravenous lines prepared. Wendy held Marianne's hand, whispering words of encouragement. Marianne's mind spun in circles of fear. Her baby was early, her support system was in tatters, and the father of her child was nowhere to be found. Across town, Leonard was seated in his office, talking strategy with lawyers about reining in the scandal, when his phone rang. Marianne's name flashed on the screen. For a moment, he hesitated. He was still angry, still fixated on how to salvage his public image. But something compelled him to answer. "Marianne," his voice was taut. "It's Wendy," came the voice on the other end, thick with urgency. "Marianne's in labor. It's too soon, Leonard. She's at Chicago Memorial. You need to come." Now, Leonard's heart nearly stopped. The baby was coming early. Without a second thought, he grabbed his coat, barked instructions at his staff to handle the next steps, and dashed out. His mind whirred with regret and alarm. He had betrayed Marianne, put her under immense stress, and now, as she faced a precarious birth, she might need him. Racing through the city, he recalled those nights when Marianne first told him they were expecting. The way her eyes had sparkled with hope, how they had fantasized about naming the child after grandparents or famed literary characters. Each memory tore at him. Guilt weighed heavily, but he pressed forward, determined to be there, if only to witness the birth of his child. As he skidded into the hospital's parking lot, news vans were already stationed outside. Paparazzi recognized his car, cameras flashing. He shielded his face, pushing through questions about the affair, about his role as a father, about Roxanne. Security escorted him to the maternity ward, where Wendy met him at the door, her expression strained. Inside, Marianne lay on a hospital bed, monitors beeping frantically. "Doctor." Spencer was giving urgent instructions to the nursing staff. The baby's heart rate indicated signs of distress, and Marianne's blood pressure was alarmingly high. Fear stabbed Leonard's chest. He tried to approach Marianne, but she turned her head away, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. She didn't have the strength to talk or push him away. Pain and betrayal warred on her features. He stood there, feeling powerless, overshadowed by machines and medical personnel who bustled around. In the chaos, Dr. Spencer announced they needed an emergency C-section to save mother and child. Leonard stumbled back, horrified that Marianne's life hung in the balance. Clutching Wendy's arm, he asked, "Is she going to be okay? Is the baby going to be okay?" Wendy didn't have answers. Marianne was wheeled into surgery. Leonard was ushered into a waiting area, where he sank into a chair, head in his hands. It struck him with brutal clarity. He might lose both of them, the wife he had forsaken and the child he had barely acknowledged. Tears, thick and hot, blurred his vision. In that quiet corridor, while reporters murmured in the distance, Leonard realized the cost of his betrayal might be irreparable. Time stretched interminably in the hospital corridor. Leonard paced. Wendy sat with her arms crossed, silent tears marking her cheeks. On his phone, messages from Roxanne went unread. In that moment, nothing mattered but the fate of Marianne and the baby. Finally, after what felt like hours, Dr. Spencer emerged from surgery, removing her mask. "The baby's in NICU," she said softly, her eyes revealing the gravity of the situation. Marianne experienced significant complications during delivery. Her blood pressure was dangerously high, and there was a lot of bleeding. "We've stabilized her for now, but she's in critical condition. We need to monitor her closely for the next 24 hours. Leonard's legs nearly gave way. He slumped back onto a bench, tears streaming down his face. He hated himself for what he had done, for the stress, the betrayal, all the illusions of grandeur that led him here. Wendy placed a hand on his shoulder, but he barely noticed. Nothing in his entire empire, no contract, no wealth could fix this. He mustered the courage to ask, "Can I see her?" And, "My child," Dr. Spencer hesitated but relented. Marianne was transferred to a recovery room, pale and unconscious, tubes inserted to administer vital medications. Leonard approached her bedside trembling. Gently, he took her hand in his. He whispered her name, his voice a broken echo of remorse. But Marianne didn't stir. A nurse guided Leonard to the NICU, where he glimpsed his tiny infant swaddled in tubes and wires, fighting for breath inside an incubator. A hush enveloped him, an awe that was quickly overshadowed by dread. That fragile human life was a part of him, and he had recklessly endangered it, tossing aside responsibility for the sake of fleeting pleasure. Outside the hospital, the media circus continued, but Leonard paid it no mind. He spent the night alternating between Marianne's room and the NICU, refusing to leave, even when staff suggested he rest. Guilt and fear consumed him, but beneath that churn of emotions flickered a surge of paternal love. He recognized it now. Too late, this baby was everything. He vowed silently that if Marianne pulled through, he would do whatever it took to right his wrongs. But fate had another cruel turn in store. At dawn, as Leonard sat slumped in a hallway chair, his phone buzzed with a barrage of missed calls. "Roxanne." He stepped away to answer one call, snapping irritably. "Roxanne, this is not the time." "Marianne, almost." He faltered, tears clogging his throat, but Roxanne's sobs reverberated through the line. She revealed through gasping breaths that she had received dire news from her own doctor. For weeks, she'd been experiencing dizzy spells and fatigue, which she had attributed to stress, but a deeper examination revealed she had a rare, congenital heart condition that had gone unnoticed. Now, complications were surfacing, and she was terrified. "I need you, Leonard," she pleaded. "I'm scared." Leonard clenched his eyes shut, exhaustion and panic coursing through him. In the space of a single day, the two women tied to his life faced mortal peril. One, his pregnant wife, who had just endured a catastrophic birth. The other, the mistress he had betrayed his wife for. And he was stuck, torn between a wife in critical care and a mistress with a life-threatening diagnosis. The bitter irony was not lost on him. In chasing after forbidden fruit, he had thrown everything away, and now he might lose them both. In a daze, Leonard hastily left Marianne's side, despite every fibre in his being screaming to stay, because Roxanne begged him to come. The guilt was suffocating, but he rationalized that Marianne was in stable condition for the moment, while Roxanne had no one else to turn to. Wendy, outraged, demanded an explanation. When he confessed Roxanne's medical emergency, Wendy glared at him, tears brimming. "You're abandoning Marianne again. You have no loyalty." But Leonard left anyway, chasing the illusions of responsibility he felt for Roxanne. He arrived at the private clinic where Roxanne was admitted, pushing through reporters who had tracked him. In the sterile room, he found Roxanne connected to heart monitors, her cheeks streaked with tears. Without preamble, she reached for his hand. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. They both knew her apology encompassed more than just this moment. It was a confession that, in their lust and greed, they had destroyed everything good in Leonard's life. Doctors explained that Roxanne needed immediate surgery to repair a valve anomaly. Her chance of survival wasn't guaranteed, but it was her only hope. Leonard sat with her, wrestling with his conscience. Hours passed in restless waiting. Then, as if orchestrated by the hand of fate itself, his phone buzzed again. Dr. Spencer, calling from the hospital. Marian's condition had taken a turn for the worse. Internal bleeding. They feared a stroke. She might not make it unless they undertook drastic interventions. Leonard was paralyzed, anguish scraping at his insides. The doctors announced they were ready to wheel Roxanne into surgery. Simultaneously, Marianne's life hung in the balance across town. He couldn't be in two places at once. In an agony of indecision, he tried to weigh the woman he had once loved wholeheartedly, his wife, the mother of his child, against the mistress he had thrown it all away for. Both were in mortal peril. Both needed him. Sobbing, Leonard finally muttered, "I'm sorry." He kissed Roxanne's forehead as the medical team prepared to move her. Then he spun on his heel and dashed out, deciding in that wrenching moment to return to Marianne's side. He was done running from the woman he had wronged the most. Racing against time, he sped through city streets, weaving past honking cars, ignoring red lights. He arrived, breathless, outside Marianne's hospital room, only to find Wendy slumped in a chair, pale and teary-eyed. "The doctors are with her," they said. "There's not much time," Wendy managed. Leonard burst into the ICU to see Marianne unconscious and hooked to machines. Dr. Spencer stood grimly in the corner. Leonard collapsed at Marianne's bedside, clutching her limp hand. Tears, regrets, words of apology all tumbled out. He begged her to wake up, to forgive him, but her eyelids remained closed. The room beeped with the alarm of a dropping heart rate. Nurses hurried in, ushering Leonard away. They attempted every measure, but Marianne slipped away, the strain on her body proving too great. In a hushed moment, her heartbeat flatlined. Overcome, Leonard couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The woman who had once been his anchor, his moral guide, and the mother of his child gone. Moments later, Dr. Spencer pointed to the window, where a nurse held a small bundle. The baby barely stable, but still holding on miraculously lived. A new soul in a precarious world. Leonard wept uncontrollably at the glass, pressing his forehead against it, aware that Marianne had died without hearing his final apologies, without seeing their baby grow. Meanwhile, across the city, Roxanne went into cardiac arrest during surgery. The damage to her heart was more extensive than the doctors anticipated, and the operation couldn't save her. Within hours of Marianne's passing, Roxanne died too, alone in an operating theatre with no one to hold her hand. When Leonard finally mustered the will to call the clinic for an update, he learned the shocking news. Roxanne was gone. In a single harrowing day, he lost them both, the loyal wife he had carelessly discarded, and the mistress for whom he had sacrificed his integrity. All that remained was a newborn infant, struggling for survival in a hospital incubator. Leonard sank to his knees, gutted by sorrow. The karmic weight of his actions crushed him. In chasing fleeting passion and grandeur, he had destroyed the very pillars that held his life together, and fate had administered its final blow, leaving him to confront the wreckage on his own. Word spread fast. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire! Leonard Aldridge loses wife and mistress in tragic double blow," accompanied by lurid articles detailing the scandal's catastrophic outcome. Aldridge Global's board convened an emergency session to address the plunging stock prices. Investors fled, concerned that Leonard's personal disgrace signaled deeper corporate instability. Competitors circled like vultures, eyeing the weakened empire for hostile takeovers. Leonard retreated to the NICU, refusing to leave his newborn side, isolating himself from board obligations, from the media, from everything. Lawyers and PR agents hounded him to make statements, sign legal documents, or salvage what was left of his fortune. He ignored them all, consumed by a grief so thick it threatened to suffocate him. Each beep of the incubator was a fragile lifeline. After several days, the baby grew stronger, but the prognosis remained cautious. Dr. Spencer, her face etched with sympathy, assured Leonard they were doing everything possible. One afternoon, a nurse approached with a small plastic bracelet, Marianne's hospital tag. With trembling hands, Leonard took it, tears blurring his vision. "You can't change what happened," the nurse said gently, "but you can still be a father." In that moment, Leonard felt a glimmer of something akin to resolve. He hadn't been there for Marianne. He had failed Roxanne too, in his way. But maybe he could do right by his child, the only innocent in this twisted saga. It was a sliver of redemption, overshadowed by a vast sea of guilt, yet it was all he had left. Weeks passed. Marianne was laid to rest in a quiet funeral, attended by her close friends and family. Leonard stood at the grave, a solitary figure, overshadowed by reporters lurking behind distant trees. The funeral for Roxanne was separate, smaller, filled with showbiz acquaintances and a handful of sorrowful fans. Some media outlets speculated that Leonard might attend, but he didn't. He sent flowers, accompanied by a card that simply read, "I'm sorry." He couldn't face that reality again. The day came when the doctors finally allowed Leonard to hold his daughter, an infant, so small, so fragile, yet remarkably alive. As he cradled her in his arms, an onslaught of remorse tangled with unexpected joy. He whispered promises to love her forever, to shield her from the chaos that had destroyed her mother. In that hushed hospital corner, father and child formed the beginnings of a broken family's new chapter. No apology or restitution could bring back Marianne or Roxanne. No sum of money or moment of regret could alter the cataclysm Leonard's hubris and deceit unleashed. But one thing was certain: he would spend the rest of his life bearing that burden, striving and perhaps failing to be worthy of the child who represented both love and loss. In that child's tiny heartbeat, Leonard found a reason to keep breathing, even if the shadow of his sins would haunt him forever. In a single day, Leonard Aldridge's entire world collapsed, proving that greed and betrayal carry a devastating cost. He lost Marianne, the devoted wife who stood by him from the beginning, and Roxanne, the mistress who lured him away with excitement and promises of a lavish future. Both gone while he was left holding a fragile newborn whose life began amid tragedy. His fortune couldn't shield him from the relentless hand of karma. Now, with everything shattered, Leonard faces a stark truth. No amount of money can buy back lost love or mend a soul drained by regret. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on the true value of loyalty and the dangers of selfish ambition. Share your thoughts, and if you believe in the power of cautionary tales, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep these lessons alive so no one else needs to learn them the hard way. Betrayal is a bitter pill, especially when it comes from the one person you trusted with your life. In this riveting tale, we meet Maria Carter, a vibrant young woman whose world crumbles the day her millionaire husband, Victor Carter, turns his back on her. With a newborn life stirring inside her, she's cast away, hurt and penniless, left to survive on her wits and unwavering determination. Yet fate often spins its own surprises. Years later, Maria returns, not just with twin children, but also with something far more shocking: legal papers that challenge everything Victor built. This is a story of secrets, resilience, and a mother's unstoppable resolve. Victor Carter was the epitome of wealth and status. Born into the prestigious Carter family of New York, he never knew a day of hardship. By his early 20s, he'd launched his own real estate development company, Carter and Company, which soon grew into a multi-million-dollar empire. His name peppered society columns, often linked to glamorous events at the Waldorf Astoria or charity galas at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He wore power like a tailored suit, always crisp, always commanding attention. Yet beneath the glitter of his success lay a man whose heart was as restless as his ambitions. When Victor met Maria Ramirez, who later took his last name, many thought it an odd pairing. She was from a middle-class background, with a quiet warmth that belied her keen intelligence. Maria had no illusions about Victor's world. She'd been raised to value hard work, honesty, and family. She'd studied psychology at Columbia University on a scholarship, determined to forge her own path despite financial constraints. It was this grounded nature that first drew Victor to her. He was tired of the superficial circles he frequented, bored by women who saw him as a mere stepping stone to wealth. Maria, however, made it clear she neither needed nor wanted a free ride. She found Victor intriguing yet guarded, driven yet haunted by some unseen spectre of dissatisfaction. Their courtship happened fast. One evening, they found themselves in a heated debate about philanthropy at a charity dinner for underprivileged youth. Maria questioned whether the money truly reached the intended children or if it was swallowed up by bureaucracy. Victor, used to writing sizable checks to prestigious causes, was intrigued by her cynicism. Instead of dismissing her argument, he invited her to his penthouse overlooking Central Park to hear her proposals. She offered cost-effective ideas for direct aid, from small scholarships for promising students to grassroots programs focusing on tutoring and mentorship. Something about Maria's directness made Victor see the world from a different lens. Their hours-long chat ended with a champagne toast on his rooftop, where they shared their first kiss under the shimmering city lights. After only a year, they were married in a lavish ceremony in the Hamptons. The wedding was orchestrated by Samantha Jones, the go-to wedding planner for Manhattan's elite, and attended by notable figures like Robert Greene, a public relations mogul, and James Carlton, heir to an automobile fortune. Photos of the bride and groom graced society magazines for weeks. Maria wore a smile that seemed both radiant and nervous, as if she was stepping onto a precarious bridge into Victor's vast world. But the cracks began to form soon after they said their vows. Victor's business expansions demanded near constant travel, often leaving Maria alone in their spacious penthouse. She tried to fill the void with volunteering and further education, but she couldn't shake the sense that her husband's promise of always being there was steadily fading. The more success Carter and company amassed, the less time Victor had for the domestic life he claimed to value. Tensions reached new heights when Maria discovered she was pregnant. Initially, Victor was thrilled. He envisioned a son who would someday inherit the Carter legacy. But as Maria's pregnancy advanced, his enthusiasm waned. The physical realities, doctor's appointments, and her emotional ups and downs were inconveniences he hadn't bargained for. She felt him pulling away, but each time she asked, he deflected. He claimed that business deals in Tokyo or board meetings in London were critical to their future security. She, in turn, felt like an afterthought. Still, Maria believed in the power of communication. She tried to talk, to share her fears of losing him to his ambitions. But their conversations became more arguments than dialogues. One night, after returning from a grueling 2-week trip to Dubai, Victor lashed out in frustration when Maria questioned his distant behavior. In a cold, measured tone, he let slip a horrifying truth. "I never asked for this family thing right now. It's not a convenient time." That sentence rattled her. Their marriage was less than 2 years old, and here he was, speaking of their unborn child as if it were a corporate inconvenience. Though he apologized later, Maria sensed a deeper wedge. Days later, an explosive argument ended with Victor practically shutting the door in her face, literally sending her away to a friend's apartment while he sorted out his priorities. He never called. He never visited. He merely had one of his assistants deliver a typed note instructing Maria to take whatever time she needed, along with a cursory check that felt like a payoff. This humiliating betrayal cut to the core. Devastated, Maria returned to her mother's modest home in Queens. She cradled her unborn child, tears streaming, wondering how a man she'd loved so deeply could be so callous. The glitz and glamour of the Carter name had dissolved into heartbreak, and unbeknownst to Victor, the unborn child he referred to so dismissively was not one, but two twins. When Maria discovered she was expecting twins, she was already living in a cramped guest room at her mother's small apartment in Corona, Queens. If the pregnancy had been stressful before, the realization she was carrying twins magnified that stress tenfold. Yet, in a strange twist, it also emboldened her. She vowed that these children would never feel unwanted or unloved, even if their father had effectively abandoned them. Maria's mother, Anita Ramirez, was a tough woman who had immigrated from the Dominican Republic decades earlier. She'd worked as a nurse's aide, struggling through long shifts to provide a life for Maria. Anita's paternal instincts flared at the sight of her pregnant daughter. She was furious at Victor, calling him a sinvergüenza who had no honor. But she also recognized her daughter's heartbreak and tried to balance her anger with support. Financially, Maria was in a precarious situation. The check Victor's assistant had delivered was substantial by most standards, enough for a down payment on a decent home. But accepting it felt like selling her pride. Maria debated what to do. Should she deposit the money for the sake of her unborn children, or tear it up to stand on principle? Eventually, she settled on a compromise. She opened a separate account for the twins, depositing only half of the amount. She'd use it for their needs if absolutely necessary. The rest of her daily living expenses would come from her own hustle. To that end, Maria found part-time work at a community center near her mother's home, offering counseling sessions. Drawing on her psychology background, she helped immigrant families cope with stress, guiding them through cultural and financial challenges. Despite her own turmoil, she found solace in assisting others. It reminded her of the days she'd spent discussing direct philanthropy with Victor, back when he seemed to care about making a genuine difference in the world. That memory now felt like a cruel joke. Time marched forward, and soon Maria was in her 7th month. The pregnancy was tough. Carrying twins took a toll on her body. She was often exhausted, and the cramped living space only added to her emotional strain. Sometimes, late at night, she would scroll through social media, catching glimpses of Victor's extravagant life. One day it was a photograph of him at a black tie fundraiser. Another day, a business summit in Zurich. There was no mention of his pregnant wife, no inquiry about her well-being. All she had were cold, businesslike text messages from one of his assistants, occasionally asking about medical updates. She never replied. Then came the night Maria went into premature labor. A heavy rainstorm pounded against the windows of her mother's apartment, turning the roads into rivers. Panicked, Anita called for an ambulance when Maria's contractions started coming at frightening intervals. The paramedics rushed her to Elmhurst Hospital. The twins, one boy and one girl, arrived 6 weeks early, tiny and fragile, but alive. Maria named them Matteo and Luna, after her mother's cultural heritage and her own desire to infuse them with hope and light. Those days in the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, NICU, were tense. The twins each weighed under 5 pounds, their tiny bodies hooked up to tubes and monitors. Maria and Anita prayed by their sides, day and night. Not once did Victor appear. Not a single call, text, or visitor's pass was used by anyone from the Carter side. It was as though mother and children had ceased to exist in Victor's world. When the twins finally grew strong enough to be discharged, Maria faced the reality of raising them on her own. Their medical bills had mounted, even after insurance, leaving her anxious about how she would manage. Yet an opportunity arose in an unexpected place: the community center. The director recognized Maria's skill and dedication and offered her a full-time position coordinating mental health outreach programs. It didn't pay six figures, but it came with a modest salary and health insurance enough to give her children a stable start. For months, Maria juggled single motherhood with a demanding job. She'd wake up before dawn to feed and change Matteo and Luna, drop them off at a small daycare run by a trusted neighbor, then hustle to the community center. Late in the evening, she'd cradle them in her arms as she read children's stories, determined that no matter her circumstances, the twins would feel the warmth of a mother's love. Every so often, a pang of anger or sadness would stab her heart. She'd think of Victor's broken promises, his dismissal of her pregnancy, and his utter absence. Now that the children were here, she wrestled with the idea of taking legal action, but part of her hesitated. She feared a drawn-out court battle that might bring out the worst in everyone. Still, the injustice gnawed at her. She wanted to shield Matteo and Luna from the pain of having an indifferent father, but she also wondered if they had a right to the Carter name and the privileges that came with it. While rummaging through old files one night, Maria stumbled upon her marriage certificate and some pre-marital paperwork. The documents reminded her that not everything was as one-sided as Victor would have liked. Early in their marriage, during her volunteer stints, Maria had shared valuable insights into philanthropic strategies that Carter and Company soon adopted. She had emails and signed notes acknowledging her contributions as an unofficial consultant. In some communications, Victor had even promised a small percentage stake in the philanthropic branch of Carter and Company if her strategies proved successful. It was a faint glimmer of hope, a sign that she had legal grounds to claim some form of ownership. Indeed, the philanthropic branch, Carter's Hope, as it was branded, had become a significant part of Victor's public image. It garnered positive press and attracted deals that expanded his business portfolio. She realized that her behind-the-scenes input had contributed to the empire Victor now enjoyed. Suddenly, the idea of fighting back didn't seem so futile. Spurred on by this discovery, Maria decided it was time to consult a lawyer. If Victor Carter thought he could discard her and the twins without consequence, he was gravely mistaken. Maria reached out to an old college acquaintance, Jonathan Pierce, who worked at a modest law firm in Brooklyn. Though not a high-profile attorney, Jonathan had a reputation for diligence and empathy traits Maria deeply valued. She confided in him about the entire saga, the wedding, the betrayal, the twins, and her legal documents that suggested a fractional stake in Carter and Company's philanthropic ventures. Jonathan was both concerned and intrigued. He saw that Maria's evidence, her consulting notes, email exchanges, and signed acknowledgements provided enough ground to claim partial ownership. If not ownership of Carter's entire empire, it at least established a legitimate share in Carter's Hope, a division that had grown into a multi-million-dollar philanthropic machine. But any lawsuit against Victor Carter was destined to be an uphill battle. He had top-tier legal teams on retainer, experts who excelled at burying opponents in endless paperwork. Maria needed more than just a legal claim. She needed a strategy. In the weeks that followed, Maria and Jonathan pieced together a plan. They combed through every scrap of documentation, building a case that Maria had contributed significantly to the philanthropic branch and was promised a stake, effectively making her a silent partner. Jonathan explained that such cases often hinge on how the promise was articulated, whether verbally or in writing, and if there's evidence of the promised benefit impacting business decisions. Luckily, Maria had saved every email and even had a few voice recordings from their brainstorming sessions. In one particularly damning snippet, Victor's voice could be heard saying, "If we're ever successful with Carter's Hope, you'll be the reason, Maria. I'm committing to that in every way." That was gold in legal terms. It established intent, linking her contributions to an ownership stake. Jonathan's face lit up when he heard it. It was precisely the leverage they needed. But Maria had reservations. What if a legal confrontation caused Victor to retaliate by seeking custody of the twins out of spite? She'd heard horror stories of wealthy exes who dragged children through emotional and legal turmoil. Jonathan promised to handle custody issues carefully. In the meantime, he urged her to keep the twins' existence as private as possible until their claim was strong enough that even Victor's powerful lawyers would advise him to settle. As they built their case, Maria continued her life as normally as she could, working at the community center and raising Matteo and Luna. She cherished the simple joys of motherhood, the giggles during bath time, the first coos of Mama, the way the twins' big dark eyes followed her every move. Each moment with them reminded her of why she was fighting this battle, and she vowed to see it through. Yet the pressure mounted, money was tight, and legal fees grew by the week. Though Jonathan gave her a discounted rate, the cost of depositions and expert opinions was steep. Maria stayed awake at night, perched on the edge of her bed, staring at the sleeping twins. She questioned if she was doing the right thing. Was it worth subjecting herself to the stress and possibility of a very public battle? Her mother, Anita, was unwavering in her stance. "Don't let that man get away with it," she'd say, scowling at the mere mention of Victor's name. "You and those babies deserve everything he owes you." Anita's convictions lit a flame in Maria, rekindling her desire for justice. Around this time, a close friend from college, Charlotte Baker, reached out, inviting Maria to a networking event. Charlotte was now a budding journalist at a reputable news site, and she wanted to introduce Maria to some of her colleagues. The gathering took place in a small, upscale lounge in Manhattan. Though out of her comfort zone, Maria attended, hoping to meet people who might help her philanthropic ideas gain traction, or at least shed light on how to handle public relations if her legal case against Victor ever became a media sensation. Midway through the event, Charlotte pulled her aside. "I have someone you need to meet," she whispered, leading Maria to a quiet corner. Standing there was a man who introduced himself as Edward Lawson, a well-known philanthropic advisor whose clients included high-profile celebrities and moguls. Intrigued by Maria's passion for direct impact charity models, Edward listened intently to her experiences and the community center's approach. Over the course of the evening, he offered subtle hints that he might be able to support her efforts. While this didn't immediately solve her legal quandary, Maria sensed she might be onto something bigger. The philanthropic strategies she once discussed with Victor were still hers to utilize. If she partnered with the right organizations or individuals, she could replicate the success of Carter's Hope on her own terms. And that, in turn, could strengthen her argument that she was indeed a co-creator of the philanthropic model that Victor now paraded as his own achievement. Before leaving, Edward handed her his business card. "Give me a call," he said. "I can't promise anything yet, but I see passion in your eyes." That's rare in this business. His smile felt genuine, a refreshing contrast to Victor's hollow grin. For the first time in a long while, Maria left a Manhattan event feeling hopeful rather than disillusioned. News of Maria's potential philanthropic project reached Victor's ears through the grapevine. A mutual acquaintance tipped him off that Maria was mingling with influencers in the philanthropic sector. Though the acquaintance knew nothing of the twins or the brewing legal battle, they casually mentioned that Maria seemed determined to make a significant social impact. Victor was stunned. He'd assumed Maria had quietly slipped into obscurity, perhaps returning to her mother's home in Queens, never to resurface in his orbit. After all, that was the arrangement he'd practically forced upon her when he ended their relationship. Disturbed by the rumor that she might be forging new alliances, Victor asked his assistant, Andrew, to discreetly gather information. Andrew, ever the loyal right-hand man, made a few calls, checked social media posts, and quickly reported back that Maria was indeed active in the philanthropic world, though details remained sparse. A mix of emotions churned inside Victor: annoyance, curiosity, and an odd sense of guilt he tried to suppress. His pride refused to let him acknowledge it, but deep down he remembered all the late-night conversations he'd once had with Maria. How she'd passionately championed direct outreach, personal connections, and small-scale scholarships. Had she taken those ideas and found supporters who believed in them? And if so, did that threaten his carefully curated image as a philanthropic tycoon? Meanwhile, life at Carter and Company was as hectic as ever. Victor's latest venture involved constructing a skyscraper in downtown Manhattan, an ambitious project to stand as a new symbol of his success. The building was to feature a luxury hotel, high-end apartments, and an entire floor dedicated to Carter's Hope offices, showcasing how a businessman could blend capitalism with charity. By day, Victor was in meetings with architects and investors. By night, he attended society gatherings, flaunting his success to the likes of Robert Greene and James Carlton, who remained part of his social circle. He rarely spared a thought for the woman who once bore his name until now. Unable to quell his curiosity, Victor decided to contact Maria. One late afternoon, as Maria was nursing Luna while Matteo napped in a crib near her desk at the community center, her phone buzzed. The caller ID read Victor Carter. Her heart pounded. She hadn't heard from him directly in over a year. Why now? Her first instinct was to ignore the call, but something told her to pick up. She needed to see how far he would go to pretend that she and the twins didn't exist. "Hello?" she answered, voice steady but cautious. "Maria." "It's been a while," Victor began, his tone smooth but distant. "I heard you've been busy in philanthropic circles. I wanted to, see how you're doing." She nearly laughed at the absurdity. Here was a man who hadn't bothered to ask about her well-being throughout her pregnancy or after childbirth, and now he feigned concern. Refusing to mince words, she replied, "Cut to the chase, Victor. We both know you're not calling to check on me." He hesitated for a moment, letting out a sigh. "I hear you've been pitching philanthropic strategies, maybe similar to some things we used to discuss. You know, at Carter's Hope, we're always open to collaboration. Maybe we could align our efforts." Maria felt anger surge, but she remained calm. Why on earth would I want to align efforts with someone who discarded me the moment things got inconvenient? "I'm surprised you even remember those discussions, since you never gave me official credit." Victor swallowed. "That's not entirely fair. We parted ways because—" She cut him off. "We parted ways because you threw me out, remember?" A tense silence followed. Maria could practically feel him struggling to maintain composure. "Look," she continued, "I have my own path now. I won't be needing your so-called collaboration." Victor cleared his throat, forcing a polite tone. "You might find it beneficial. After all, Carter and Company can offer resources, financial backing, influence. We can do great things together." The audacity left her speechless for a moment. Had he forgotten that she was his wife and that he'd never even acknowledged their children? Suddenly, her fury broke. "Don't you dare talk to me about resources," she snapped. "If you genuinely want to help, let's talk about the twins." A stunned pause on Victor's end. What twins?" Maria froze. She hadn't planned to reveal it like this, but something inside her had snapped. "Yes, twins. Your children, Victor. I have a son and a daughter, Matteo and Luna. They're almost a year old now. Congratulations. You're a father. She could hear Victor's breathing quicken. "That this must be some kind of ploy," he said almost in a whisper. You never told me." She let out a hollow laugh. "You never cared to ask." And with that, she ended the call. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of emotions. Part of her felt triumphant, as though she'd landed a direct blow on a man who thought he was untouchable. Another part of her felt raw and terrified. She'd just let the cat out of the bag, and Victor now knew about Matteo and Luna, who knew how he would respond. Sure enough, within an hour, Jonathan Pierce's phone lit up with calls from Carter and Company's legal department. They demanded paternity tests and threatened countersuits if Maria tried to press charges or claim child support. Jonathan calmly replied that they should expect formal papers soon, and that Maria was fully prepared to prove everything in court. What Victor didn't realize was that Maria had meticulously prepared for this moment. She had medical records, DNA test results taken at birth, and numerous witnesses to her pregnancy and the twins' arrival. She also had a strong legal team guided by Jonathan. She was done being meek and fearful. Now she was in the driver's seat. Within hours of Maria abruptly ending her phone call with Victor, the gears of an impending legal battle began to grind. The moment she revealed that the unborn child he had once dismissed as an inconvenience was actually two children, a boy and a girl, Victor's world shifted. He had built his life on certainty and control, from corporate boardrooms to manicured charity galas. Now, uncertainty loomed on all fronts. Beyond the personal shock, he also feared for his carefully crafted public image as a benevolent magnate. If news leaked that he had abandoned a pregnant wife carrying twins, his reputation and his investors' confidence could come crashing down. On Maria's end, the revelation was bittersweet. She had meant to keep the twins' existence private until her legal groundwork was unassailable. But part of her was relieved. The secret was out, and she no longer needed to pretend that Victor Carter was merely a chapter in her past. The father of her children now had no choice but to face the consequences of his actions. She braced herself for the tempest to come. Almost immediately, Carter and Company's legal team, led by a man named Sebastian Myers, demanded a paternity test, sending formal letters to Maria's attorney, Jonathan Pierce. Though framed politely, the letters carried an air of threat. They implied that if the tests proved negative, Carter and Company would pursue legal action for defamation and emotional distress. But Maria knew the truth. She had unequivocal proof that Victor was the father, including medical records, hospital statements, and earlier DNA tests performed while the twins were still in the NICU. The evidence was incontrovertible. Within a week, Maria and Victor found themselves in preliminary court proceedings at the Manhattan Family Court. Nervous energy buzzed in the corridors. While the hearing was not swarmed by media yet, word had begun to leak to a few tabloids. Photographers, picking up on rumors of a scandal involving a wealthy real estate mogul, hovered near the courthouse doors, eager to snap any telling photograph. Maria arrived with Jonathan, feeling her heart pound as she walked the marble floors. She spotted Victor at the far end of the corridor, flanked by three impeccably dressed attorneys. He refused to meet her gaze, though she could sense the tension simmering in him. The judge presiding over their initial hearing was stern and businesslike. After hearing the basics, the court set schedules for formal DNA testing, financial disclosures, and initial custody considerations. While the hearing itself was brief, its implications loomed large. It was now a matter of public record that Victor Carter faced a claim of paternity, and that he contested none of the steps required to confirm it. In the days that followed, the press frenzy grew, fueled partly by anonymous leaks. Glitzy tabloids ran headlines such as "Millionaire mogul's secret twins" and "Carter's hidden heirs." On social media, Discussions split along ideological lines. Some painted Maria as an opportunist, looking to exploit Victor's wealth for a lucrative settlement. Others sympathized with her, appalled by the idea of a pregnant woman cast aside by a powerful husband. Maria, advised by Jonathan and a small PR team, limited her public remarks. She knew it was better to let legal facts speak for themselves. Yet, the saga took a surprising turn when Richard Farnsworth, an older real estate titan who had heavily invested in Carter and Company, caught wind of Victor's personal predicament. Farnsworth, a man known for his old-fashioned principles, had once admired Victor's charisma and bold business ventures. However, he despised scandal. Discovering that Victor might have abandoned his pregnant wife, Farnsworth felt morally repulsed, so much so that he issued a statement freezing his investments in Carter's newest skyscraper project until the matter was ethically resolved. "Family is essential," he told a financial newspaper. "I cannot, in good conscience, continue to pour money into a venture when the CEO is embroiled in such a moral debacle." This development sent tremors through Carter and Company's boardroom. Stocks dipped amid investor unease, and murmurs of dissatisfaction spread within the ranks of the company. By publicly rebuking Victor, Farnsworth emboldened other business partners to question not only Victor's ethics, but also his reliability. A manager at a major bank who had once pursued a joint venture with Carter and Company was quoted saying, "If he can't handle family matters responsibly, how can we trust him with a multi-billion-dollar project?" While Victor scrambled to contain the fallout, Maria fought her own battle on a different front. She was still balancing her day job at the community center with the exhausting task of raising 2 toddlers alone. The emotional toll of the legal proceedings weighed heavily on her. She knew the fight had only just begun. Depositions, financial investigations, and custody hearings lay ahead. At moments, she questioned whether her pursuit of justice was worth the strain. But every time she saw Matteo and Luna's bright eyes when she came home, she found renewed conviction. They deserved acknowledgement, security, and a future untainted by their father's abandonment. Meanwhile, Jonathan Pierce and his legal team meticulously built Maria's case. They gathered email threads and signed documents from Maria's early days with Carter and Company, strengthening their parallel claim that she had contributed significantly to the philanthropic division, Carter's Hope. The plan was not only to secure child support and custody arrangements, but also to validate Maria's partial ownership in the philanthropic arm. If successful, she would hold more than just a moral victory. She would have a tangible share in the empire that Victor once shut her out of. By the time the DNA results confirmed Victor's paternity, no surprise to Maria or Jonathan, the stage was set for a fierce legal showdown. The next court date loomed, and talk of mediation swirled among the attorneys. Under mounting public scrutiny and investor pressure, Victor's team hinted that a settlement might be possible. For Maria, that would mean a chance to avoid a drawn-out court battle, as long as the settlement truly reflected justice for herself and the twins. As the final days of autumn approached New York, the swirl of lawsuits, media coverage, and corporate turmoil converged into one relentless storm. Neither side could fully predict the outcome, but one thing was clear: the lives of Maria, Victor, and the twins would never be the same. The shockwaves rippled far beyond family drama, striking at the heart of Victor's empire and exposing the fragile foundation upon which his outward success was built. In the eye of the storm stood Maria, resolved to protect her children's future and ready, at last, to face Victor head-on. A low hum of anxiety filled the Manhattan law office, where the first official mediation session between Maria and Victor was scheduled. The conference room, located on the 28th floor of a sleek skyscraper near Bryant Park, had been deliberately designed to project calm, warm lighting, tasteful abstract art, and a large glass window that offered a panoramic view of the city. Still, the atmosphere felt charged with tension and uncertainty, as if the participants were bracing for a clash of wills they had long postponed. Maria arrived early with her lawyer, Jonathan Pierce, and a junior associate who carried several thick folders of evidence. She wore a fitted blazer and kept her hair neatly pinned back, projecting confidence despite her pounding heart. The stakes had never been higher. Not only was she fighting for child support and the future of her twins, but also for recognition of her stake in Carter's Hope, a philanthropic venture she had essentially co-founded, yet received no credit for in official company documents. Across town, Victor Carter stepped out of a black luxury sedan, adjusting his cufflinks with a nervous flick of the wrist. He was flanked by two of his own high-powered attorneys and his personal assistant. Victor's face betrayed the weariness he felt. For months, he had been juggling corporate fires sparked by investor unrest and media gossip about his secret children. Now, with DNA tests confirming that he was indeed the father of Maria's twins, he had run out of ways to dodge the confrontation. A part of him hated that the matter had escalated to this point. Another part resented Maria for upending his meticulously curated life. When the two parties finally settled into their seats, neither Maria nor Victor spoke immediately. The mediator, a composed, middle-aged woman named Deborah Klein, opened the session by clarifying its purpose, to find a mutually acceptable resolution to the questions of child support, custody, and any claims surrounding Carter's Hope. Deborah's tone was patient yet firm, making it clear that this was a structured environment. Emotional outbursts would not be dismissed, but they would have to be channeled productively. Jonathan led the opening statements on Maria's side. He painted a picture of a young mother abandoned during pregnancy, forced to rely on her mother's modest home in Queens. He outlined how Maria not only shouldered the emotional toll of raising two children alone, but also contributed significant intellectual property to Carter's Hope. As he spoke, Victor kept his eyes trained on the polished table, occasionally flicking his gaze to Maria. When Jonathan finished, Victor's lead counsel, Sebastian Myers, countered that while Victor regretted the breakdown of the marriage, the timeline and financial obligations still needed to be clarified. He added that no formal contract had ever officially recognized Maria's partnership in Carter's Hope. The mediator then invited Maria to speak. Her voice trembled initially, but she soon found her footing. She spoke of how she had believed in Victor's vision, how they had spent hours brainstorming philanthropic strategies aimed at direct community intervention, and how she had eagerly helped organize small pilot programs ideas that later became pillars of Carter's Hope. My contributions may not be on any formal contract, she concluded, but they were real, and they made a tangible difference. Victor finally lifted his gaze. The lines of fatigue on his forehead deepened. "I won't deny you contributed," he said quietly, choosing his words with care. "But you can't expect that conversation alone gives you a corporate stake." His tone was guarded, though not dismissive. Maria recognized a flicker of guilt in his eyes, as if he knew his statement rang hollow after their years of partnership, both personal and professional. For the next few hours, the mediator guided them through the labyrinth of financial records, philanthropic projects, and personal responsibilities. Despite the earlier tension, the mediation process forced a structure onto their conflict that made actual compromise possible. Lawyers on both sides scribbled notes, calculating potential child support figures, trust fund options, and investment valuations for Carter's Hope. Maria insisted on securing a fair share for the twins, plus acknowledgement of her role in the philanthropic branch. Victor, aware that going to court could damage him further, especially under scrutiny from major investors like Richard Farnsworth, expressed willingness to negotiate a respectable settlement. The conversation took a more personal turn when custody arose. Maria's eyes clouded with hurt as she recalled the months of pregnancy she endured alone, the nights when Matteo and Luna were in the NICU without any support from their father. Victor, uncomfortable, nodded but said nothing. Then, in a moment of uncharacteristic vulnerability, he admitted, "I was scared. My business was growing so fast, and I felt like I couldn't handle it all. That's no excuse. I just ran." A charged silence enveloped the room. For a brief second, Maria saw not the arrogant mogul who threw her out, but a fearful man who lacked the emotional tools to face unexpected fatherhood. It didn't erase the pain he had caused, nor did it suddenly justify his actions, but it added a dimension to him she had rarely acknowledged. She cleared her throat and replied, "You can still make things right, Victor, but it can't just be about money. You have to show up." Slowly, an outline of a settlement emerged, a substantial trust fund for Matteo and Luna, ongoing child support, and a clear custody schedule that allowed Victor a genuine role in their upbringing. More delicate was the matter of Carter's hope. In a move that drew surprised looks from his own counsel, Victor indicated he was open to granting Maria an official percentage in the philanthropic division. "It's only fair," he said at last, casting a sidelong glance at Maria. "I've always said Carter's hope wouldn't have taken off if not for your early insights." The mediator ended the day's session by commending both parties for progress made, though final details still needed to be negotiated. Walking out of the conference room, Maria felt a mix of exhaustion, relief, and lingering anger. The memory of Victor slamming a door in her face while she was pregnant still haunted her. But the fact that he was now admitting her role and recognizing the twins felt like a milestone, an acknowledgement she had once believed might never come. The next steps would involve hammering out the precise language for custody rights and ownership stakes, a process that might take multiple sessions. But for the first time since their falling out, Maria saw a faint glimmer of a future where the twins would be embraced by both parents, and where she herself would no longer be relegated to the shadows of Victor's empire. Though trust would not be easily rebuilt, a bridge, however shaky, had been planted, and its foundation rested on the simple yet profound notion of accountability. In the weeks following the mediation, the media quickly picked up on rumors of a settlement. Contrary to typical sensationalist reporting, the story began to shift focus to Maria's philanthropic vision. Journalists who followed the case discovered her dedication at the community center, her background in psychology, and her unwavering commitment to grassroots charity. Even the tabloids that once labeled her a gold digger started to offer more balanced takes, highlighting her sacrifice and resilience. Carter's Hope, now restructured with Maria on the board, launched a new initiative, the Twin Stars program, named in a subtle nod to Matteo and Luna. It aimed to fund and mentor teenage parents, providing them with educational resources, job training, and support networks. Maria worked tirelessly, ensuring the program was more than a flashy press release. She partnered with local non-profits, personally visited struggling teenage mothers, and arranged career workshops. The results were tangible, improved academic performance, better emotional support, and a pathway to independence for young parents. The press ate it up, hailing the program as a beacon of modern philanthropy. Victor, wary of negative publicity, threw his weight behind the initiative. Together, he and Maria made a handful of public appearances, sometimes awkward, but mostly professional, to promote the cause. At one event, a gala aimed at raising funds for the Twin Stars program, they addressed a crowd of influential donors. Maria spoke first, outlining the program's goals. She received a standing ovation. Then came Victor's turn. He stood at the podium, took a breath, and surprised everyone by sharing an emotional anecdote about meeting his children for the first time. "You know, for the longest time, I thought my worth hinged on professional success," he said, his voice trembling. "But I was wrong. The moment I laid eyes on Matteo and Luna, I realized that all the skyscrapers in the world couldn't fill the void of a family I nearly lost." Some in the audience teared up, others clapped. Maria couldn't gauge if his speech was entirely genuine or partly performative. Maybe it was both. Regardless, the gala raked in hefty donations, ensuring a strong start for the Twin Stars program. Emboldened by this success, Maria began planning expansions into other cities. She traveled to Boston, Chicago, and Los Angeles, forging alliances with local charities. Along the way, she brought Matteo and Luna, now toddling around, to show donors exactly who inspired her work. Still, her interactions with Victor were cautious. They communicated mostly through formal emails or scheduled visits for the twins. On rare occasions, they shared brief personal moments. Once, during a coffee break at the Carter's Hope headquarters, Victor awkwardly asked about the twins' latest milestones, words, steps, favorite songs. Maria offered him a few stories, softened by the fact that, at least now, he was trying. But she kept her guard up. Trust wasn't something she could easily hand back. A year passed, and the scandal that once rocked the tabloids faded into distant memory. Public sentiment shifted, viewing Victor as a businessman who'd stumbled but redeemed himself through fatherhood and philanthropic reforms. Maria's reputation soared. She became a sought-after speaker on the topics of ethical philanthropy and women's empowerment. Her steady presence in Carter's Hope not only gave her a platform, but also kept the organization true to its grassroots foundation. The twins were thriving. Matteo and Luna, now 2 years old, toddled around daycare centers, babbling words, scribbling crayons on blank sheets of paper. Maria decorated the walls of her modest but cozy apartment with their artwork. She could have moved somewhere far more upscale, given her newfound financial security, but she chose to remain close to the community center. It was home in ways the penthouse with Victor had never been. Then came a bolt from the blue. Richard Farnsworth, the investor who'd pulled out of Victor's skyscraper project, invited Maria to a private luncheon. He was impressed not only by the Twin Stars program, but also by Maria's core beliefs, helping people help themselves, fostering education and nurturing personal growth rather than just throwing money at problems. He proposed that she spearhead a new philanthropic trust he was setting up, independent of Carter's Hope. It would be a massive undertaking, with projects across education, healthcare, and community building. The catch? It would require Maria to relocate to Los Angeles for at least a year to establish the West Coast operations. The offer was a dream come true, but it raised complex questions. Should she uproot the twins? How would that affect Victor's visitation rights? Would taking the job jeopardize her seat on the Carter's Hope board? Above all, did she want to subject Matteo and Luna to cross-country custody arrangements? Maria mulled it over, discussing the matter with Anita, Jonathan, and even Charlotte Baker, the journalist friend who'd become a close confidant. They all encouraged her to take the opportunity, stressing that she could always arrange flights for the twins to spend time with Victor. Besides, Farnsworth promised lavish funding for the philanthropic trust, meaning Maria could replicate and even expand the success of Twin Stars on a larger scale. It was a chance to create a legacy of her own, free from Victor's shadow. Finally, she scheduled a meeting with Victor. They met in his penthouse office, a place she hadn't set foot in since before she was pregnant. The memories made her uneasy, but she stood firm. She laid out Farnsworth's proposal, her plans, and her concerns about the children's well-being. To her surprise, Victor supported her. "I won't lie, I'll miss them," he admitted, his eyes drifting to a small framed photo of the twins on his desk. "But I realize this is important for you and for them. I want them to see their mother succeed." He paused, then added, "We can figure out custody schedules, long weekends, holidays, whatever it takes." Maria felt a lump in her throat. This was a side of Victor she'd rarely seen, selfless, almost humble. Though she'd never forget his betrayal, she appreciated the gesture. She left the penthouse that day with a renewed sense of hope, not just in her career path, but in the possibility that Victor might genuinely be changing. Months later, Maria found herself standing on the balcony of a sleek Los Angeles condo, gazing at a fiery sunset over the Pacific Ocean. Mateo and Luna, now nearly 3, played with colorful blocks in the living room behind her. She was still adjusting to the laid-back West Coast vibe, a far cry from the hectic rhythm of New York. Yet the move felt right. She'd officially launched the Farnsworth Ramirez Foundation, forging partnerships with local nonprofits and even state universities. Her vision for direct impact philanthropy resonated with donors who were tired of impersonal, bureaucratic charities. Media outlets praised her as a rising figure in the philanthropic world, often citing her as a role model for women who refuse to be defined by their circumstances. Despite the distance, Victor remained present in the twins' lives. Monthly visits alternated between La and New York. They video-called every Sunday evening, allowing the kids to show off new artwork or sing nursery songs. Maria watched these interactions with cautious optimism, acknowledging that, while fatherhood came late for Victor, he was making an effort to be there in a way she once never believed he would. Back at Carter's Hope, Maria retained her board seat. She flew in quarterly for meetings and used remote conference calls to stay involved. The philanthropic division was flourishing, thanks to Maria's reforms and the heightened public profile that followed the scandal. Ironically, the very dispute that nearly destroyed Victor's public image ended up raising Carter's Hope's standing in the charity world. During one of those board meetings, Maria learned that Carter's Hope was exploring a massive expansion into affordable housing, an intersection of real estate and community service. Maria's heart fluttered at the synergy of her old philanthropic ideas and her personal experiences with community work. Even from across the country, she felt proud to see the seeds she once planted flourish into something meaningful. Time marched on, and eventually the Farnsworth Ramirez Foundation reached a milestone, a new community center in South Los Angeles dedicated to supporting low-income families. It was reminiscent of the early days when Maria worked in Queens, except on a grander scale. The official opening ceremony was a big event, garnering media buzz and drawing attention from wealthy donors, activists, and the local community. Maria invited Victor to attend, thinking it would be meaningful for Mateo and Luna. To her slight surprise, he accepted, flying into La with only a small entourage. Standing at the podium in front of an enthusiastic crowd, Maria spoke about second chances and the power of turning pain into purpose. She unveiled a plaque at the entrance naming the center the Anita Ramirez Community Hub, honoring her mother's unwavering support. After the ribbon cutting, cameras flashed, capturing a moment where Maria, with the twins, posed alongside Victor. In that moment, they appeared almost like a functional co-parenting unit, overshadowing the tumultuous past. The next day, newspapers ran headlines, "From Scandal to Service, the Carters' Legacy of Philanthropy." The narrative had finally shifted from betrayal to redemption. Shortly afterward, Maria received an unexpected parcel at her new office. It was from Victor, and inside she found official documents, ownership transfer papers. Confused, she skimmed the contents. It turned out that Victor was formally transferring an additional 5% stake of Carter's Hope, along with partial stock options in Carter and company tied specifically to philanthropic ventures. Essentially, He was amplifying her share of the organization they once co-created. A handwritten note accompanied the paperwork. "Maria, I've come to realize that Carter's Hope wouldn't exist in its current form without you. You deserve more than just a percentage on paper. You deserve recognition for the ideas and the heart you brought into this. I can never fully atone for what I did, but I hope this is a step in the right direction, Victor." Maria was stunned. She held the note in trembling hands, tears welling in her eyes. For so long she'd imagined that the best she could hope for was a tenuous truce, co-parenting for the sake of the twins, and a sliver of ownership in the philanthropic arm. This gesture went beyond that, an olive branch, an acknowledgement of her worth. While it didn't erase the past, it offered a chance at genuine partnership in the cause they once dreamed of together. After everything, it felt almost surreal. As she signed the documents, tears of relief and gratitude rolled down her cheeks. This was not just about money or power. It was about validating her contributions, her motherly sacrifices, and the countless nights she'd laid awake wondering if her life was over before it began. Now, with official ownership papers in hand, Maria felt the circle had finally closed. Thank you for sharing in this extraordinary journey of love, betrayal, and redemption. Maria's story reminds us all that it's not where you start, it's where you decide to go, and how resiliently you fight for what you believe in. From being cast aside while pregnant to returning stronger than ever, with twins in tow, Maria emerged as a formidable voice in philanthropy, demanding recognition and respect. In the end, even a powerful millionaire like Victor Carter had to bow to the strength of a mother's devotion and the undeniable force of truth. If you found inspiration or hope in this tale, please show your support, like this video, share it with friends who might need motivation, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life drama stories that empower and uplift. Your engagement fuels us to bring you more stories of resilience, courage, and triumph against all odds.